So, hey, that's wonderful. And we actually even have 5 viewers. That's amazing. So, we are waiting for Mr. Stephane Leblanc. I think he's a very interesting guy. I have been following his posts on Facebook, and I think he has a lot of wisdom to offer. So, I invited him for my Luminary Leadership podcast. And now we just need him to show up. So, please bear with me when this is my first time streaming live on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at the same time. So please bear with me. This is my virgin trip into this new tech world. I'm not used to doing it at all these platforms at the same time, but it's so smart. So you can be wherever you are and you can still follow. So I am wondering how I can find Mr. Stephane, my beautiful guest. Hey, he's going to be here in 1 minute. How nice is that? So in the meantime, I can tell you that you can ask questions. I will do my best to see on some device what you're asking. And it would be wonderful if you could participate with your questions, because I believe that we live in an era of connected leadership, so that we collaborate, we co-create, we create this together. So your questions and your comments are very, very, very welcome. For those out here, he is my beloved Stephane.
Hello.
Bonjour, quel plaisir.
Hey, bonjour.
C'est un grand moment pour moi parce que je vous ai suivi pour tellement longtemps. Et je me demandais, c'est qui c'est Stephane? C'est qui c'est Stephane? Parce que c'est très intelligent ce que vous écrivez. Et alors, je vous ai trouvé. So, for those of you who don't speak French, this is Stephane Leblanc. You are in Canada, right?
Yeah, Montreal, Canada.
Montreal, yes. And I was just telling Stephane that I have been following your posts for a while, and I actually repost them quite often because they're so full of wisdom. And then at a certain moment, I was starting to wonder, who is this Stephane? Because you were writing sometimes in French, sometimes in English, sometimes even in Danish. I don't know how you do that. So I was wondering, are you living in Scandinavia? But it's because you get your post translated, or what?
I've never written in Danish, no.
No, okay. But maybe it's Facebook who...
yeah, Facebook translates it. Yeah, I would love to write in Danish, but unfortunately I don't know.
No, okay. But it's just been interesting for me, and I think this is an interesting note to start with. The new leadership. The new leadership for me is, and we can discuss what you think it is, but for me, it's not about having a formal title or specific, but it's about taking a leadership and shining in such a way that other people start following you. And I think you're such a good example of that. Actually, you're my favorite example right now.
Thank you.
Because you always post something that is illuminating and intelligent and very wise. And so it's you can't help but repost it or notice it. And so you spread a lot of illumination on the social media, which I really appreciate. So welcome. It's a big pleasure to have you here in my Luminary Leadership podcast. And we're broadcasting live on 3 different platforms at the same time: YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. So we are trying to create as broad a reach as possible.
Beautiful.
Yes. And now I will allow you to introduce yourself, because I've been going on and on. So who is this mystical Mr. Stephane Leblanc?
It's funny you ask that, because every day I ask myself, and sometimes it's the same answer, sometimes it's a new answer. So for most of my life, I thought that who I was a machine to make money for other people. So I spent most of my career as a senior executive in aerospace, building very expensive luxury jets for the richest people in the world. And I love to say that this really fueled my ego needs to be recognized, to do something important for people that are important. And I was really in love with aviation when I was young, because it represented freedom. Because I come from a very humble family. We never traveled by plane. So, for me, aviation represented freedom, going around the world. I did that for a very long time. I was very, very good at it. And 15 years ago, I discovered a leadership, which I call transformational leadership, which is a leadership based on the heart. And this is when I embraced my masculine, but also my feminine energy of caring, nurturing. And this is when I became a leader, a real leader. And so I allowed all the masks to completely shatter and just allowed myself to be who I was, a very caring person, and the world I grew up in was very tough, very masculine, very tough, very warrior. So I have this energy in me. I'm a very tough and I can do something really, really difficult. But now I embrace the feminine side, which also does it with caring and with long-term prospects. And so I did that in a company for a long time. And then they said, we don't want that anymore. Whatever you've been doing that created all these transformations, we don't want it. We want you to leave. And it happened to me twice, two different companies. And then I finally got the message that it was time to fully embrace who I was. And I couldn't do it inside a company because inside a company, most often than not, there are too many rules. And I was born to develop a new form of leadership, which I've been doing for the last 3 years. And, everything you see that I post is inspired. And inspiration for me comes from a greater force, whatever we call it. Some people call it God, some people call it consciousness. And I allow this energy to flow through me and just, and so I'm completely surrendered. I serve the rise of consciousness around the world. And I think the reason you and I connected is because I discovered that I do this mostly through the rise of the feminine. So, as a man who is awakening every day, I wouldn't say I'm an awakened man, but I think I'm quite awakened compared to the average. There's still more to go in terms of healing. I am wise enough to know that I can achieve what I really wish in my heart and my soul, which is a world filled with love, joy, peace, and harmony through the rise of the feminine. Because the feminine is naturally caring, nurturing, and all that. And one day maybe we can have some balance, So I serve the rise of the feminine with my masculine, and I serve mostly powerful women. I want to play a big role and I help them destroy the obstacles. Whatever limiting beliefs and fears keeps them small, I help them destroy all that so they can shine bright and help you create this new world. So I think you and I we connect in this energy because you're also serving the rise of the feminine. So.
Yes, in both men and women.
Yeah, same for me. Yeah. And because a lot of women were telling me, thank you very much for serving us, but can you do the same with men? And to be honest, for a while, I was resisting it. And I think it's because of my past where I was mostly rejected by men for being too sensitive, for being basically a more whole person. But now I've discovered that I do have a role to show some men that it's possible to stay very grounded in your masculinity, but now embracing the feminine actually makes you stronger. So I am coaching men as well. So same as you, but it seems that, my community is naturally mostly feminine. So.
Yeah, I think that a lot of women are drawn to the new leadership first because it's more in alignment. I'll take care of my masculine. I'll get the microphone in front of myself. Yeah. But I think that many women are, it seems like we are more drawn to a different kind of leadership because we suffer more in the old leadership. We suffer in these very rigid structures where everybody has, lack of oxygen, but women sort of I call them the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Women and sensitive men, because they smell that lack of oxygen for everybody first. And so we see a lot of women leaving corporations and also the most creative, progressive men, and that's very unfortunate. Let's go back a little bit to why you were, why do you think you were rejected by the companies? Was it because you represented a threat to the traditional leadership? I mean, one thing is your own path and you were meant to do something else. So I get that. But also I'm interested, why are the pioneers so non-welcome in companies?
It's a very good question. I have an answer that resonates with me a lot and I use when I coach people. Is what I discovered is I've always been different in all my life. I've always thought differently than most of my peers. Some of my bosses called me a Renaissance man because I think so outside the box. And it takes a special kind of company to accept that, because it challenges the status quo. And I've discovered my sole essence in this life is a wise rebel. For a long time, it was a rebel with not too much wisdom, so that's destructive. When you embrace the wisdom, then it becomes constructive. You create something new. But I cannot tolerate something that's wrong, something that lacks integrity, something that is false. And in big corporation, there's a lot of political games where we play and we tell people what they want to hear, including shareholders sometimes. And to me, it's all about, Kirsten, levels of consciousness. As you become in a higher level of consciousness, you integrate truth. You want to speak the truth, and that could be very threatening, because you're telling the emperor he has no clothes, and most people around are yes people, and they tell him, or they don't tell him the truth. And when you start telling the truth, I discovered it could be quite threatening. And what happened is also synchronistic. After the 2008 financial crisis, the industry I worked in was completely shattered, because people didn't buy. So there was a lot of financial challenges. And it's like we had worked for 10 years to grow the company into a beautiful culture. And from one day to the next, it completely crashed. It became only about money. And I refused to do what they asked me to do, cut costs and cut people, because it didn't make sense, So, and I refused, and they said, if you don't, then you have to leave. Then I left. So, this journey also, and who I am and what you see on social media, is also the result of being fired twice, but also going through 2 major depressions. And the 2 major depressions today, I'm really thankful for them, because they were part of my awakening. And my depressions were a conflict between my soul and my ego. My soul says, this is what you should be doing. And my ego says, how are you going to live? Where's the money going to come from? And one day I completely surrendered. And here I am with you today, 3 years into my new work. I've been to 6 countries. I've touched 8,000 people. And it's, I went to Spain, I went to London, I went to Mexico. You called me to be here, and it's just synchronicity. So I take what corporations do, and organizations in general, because it's true in NGOs and governments. They reject often what wants to transform them. So what they need the most, they reject, because it's threatening, because it challenges the status quo. And what I found, Kirsten, is a lot of leaders, they want change, but they don't want change. They want transformation, but they don't want it to affect them. And for a transformation of an organization to be legitimate, to have integrity, it needs to start from the top leaders. And when it doesn't, it always fails. So that's what happened. But you and I are wise enough to know that this was my destiny. I was meant to be doing something else. And what I advise people is life nudges us in the right direction. And when we don't listen, the nudging becomes a bit more violent. If we don't listen, then it becomes so clear that we have no choice to listen. So it was kind of my journey. But I bring that into organizations. There are people that are meant to transform the system. So they need to be different enough so they can transform it, but maybe not too different so they get rejected by the system. So it's the right balance. But for some of us, it becomes too big. We can't conform. And I think some of us are creating a new world, are creating new organizations. So it's all part of the path. And it allows me, when I coach executives, women and men, to coach them, because I've been through that, And when you get rejected, are you really rejected, or you're free to be who you're meant to be? It's just not just a language. For me, I believe that it's the same in personal relationship, marriages, and someone leaves us and we feel.
Sorry.
Yesterday I was coaching a woman. She says, my boyfriend left me, 2 days ago, so I've been rejected. And I said, maybe you've been freed, so.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. It's also liberation. It's my little son here, my boss. Look, he does it. Yeah, it's it's also, there's always the other side of the coin, which is like rejection, liberation. So
Yep.
But I find it very interesting with the pioneers, because I also work with a lot of pioneers, and what I have concluded is that I can only work with the people who are actually interested, who are at the point where they really want to transform. because unless they really want to, they're not going to make it sufficient transformation to really make something happen. So you have to want it, and you have to be willing to go all the way. Because a lot of people feel like turning back when it begins to really affect them. They become like, oh, can we just go back to normal? But you can't. You have to go all the way if you want real transformation, right? So, and then I also believe that the more crisis we're in, the more we have to embrace the pioneers, because the old ways don't work anymore. We see that with COVID-19, it has created like this big disruption that we can't really go back to normal, and that's a good thing, because normal was the problem, perhaps, right? And COVID is just one of the aspects that is forcing us to rethink. So have you seen an evolution in have you seen some changes in the past few years, and especially since COVID-19, in the interest in this new conscious leadership and the willingness to transform?
Yeah, when COVID happened, I remember I was in my office on March 13th when our government said we're going to shut down the whole country. As an entrepreneur, I was very sad that day, because this was going to be a big year for me. But as a conscious leader, as someone that is working to rise consciousness, I knew that this could be really useful. Because sometimes when things are just a tiny bit difficult, people don't change. They have to become really, really difficult. And I think COVID-19, unfortunately, created a lot of chaos for a lot of people, especially businesses. And I think from a culture change point of view, in terms of companies, there's been so much progress. Like in my country here, people wanted to work from home more often. And a lot of companies were saying, we can't. And then suddenly, from one day to the next, we could. So now the problem we have where I live, downtown Montreal, there's only 5% of the people coming, 95% working from home. And then the mayor and the government are saying, oh, please come back downtown because it's affecting the shops and the stores. And people don't want to go. Because, if you're a woman in her 30s with 2 kids, and now you save 1 hour of transportation every day, or it creates a better quality of life. You're more productive, you're more fulfilled, you're more happy. So I think it has forced a lot of people to use technology, to suddenly make breakthroughs. But I don't think we've gone enough. I think it has done somewhat, but it's very quick. We open, we go back to consumption, we go back to to let's shop, let's spend money. And so I think it created some awakening, that we couldn't go to the stores for 3 months, the shopping center. And then finally we find out that we don't need all this stuff. But I think it's going to take a lot more. And if we're just honest with ourselves, COVID is only the beginning. Then it's going to be the economic crisis that will follow. Then it'll be the climate crisis, the biodiversity. I mean, there's so much things that as a society, at least in the country I live in, and I think in Scandinavia it's a bit different, that we ignore. We pretend that it doesn't exist, but it's going to hit us in the face. So I've seen some changes, more interest, and it's not over. Huh? I mean, there's an American election over the next 2 months. It's going to get really ugly, and people, when it gets really dark, are looking for some beacons of light. They're going to say, oh, this guy Stephane's been talking about something different for the last 3 years. Maybe we should listen to him, or Kirsten has been talking about the rise of the feminine. Maybe we should listen to her a bit more now, So I think crises are always hold the seed for a breakthrough, always. But the question is, are we wise enough to use the seed? Are we wise enough as a population, as a country, as a government? And when I look at the governments and business leaders in my country, I don't see so much wisdom. I see the same stuff as usual, and I'm very sad in my country that you would visit Canada, you would love it. You would feel like Scandinavia. It's a very evolved country, so close to the US, so different. But we're really struggling for gender equity. We're 18th in the world, and we're 25th for the environment protection. And I think there's a direct link between both. I think the country where there's a much better gender equity, they do so much better on the environment. And we know that from a feminine point of view. So I've seen some changes, but I'm looking for a lot more than that. I think the crisis is not over, and I think it's going to take many more crises for people to awake.
Yeah, so you could say that the question for a prospective leader is, how long do you want to suffer?
Yeah,
So, how much suffering do you want to endure before you are willing to change? That is a good question. You know, how far, you know, some people have a very large tolerance for suffering, and so they will go very, very far. And some people have a very low tolerance for suffering, and they will shift faster.
it's true. But you talked about suffering. I'm a man. I work mostly in business where it's traditionally led by men, and I suffered too. This warriorship, working 7 days a week, sacrificing your family, your health, your body, and being called weak because I was sensitive, which actually I believe is a great quality for a leader because you connect. I suffered a lot. So I could just imagine what you were saying about women, where we have quotas. We want more women in leadership, but then we ask them to lead like men. I mean, I could just imagine as a woman who maybe has a more, like most women, a more feminine energy to actually have to dress, like a nice business lady, but then to behave like a man. I could just imagine the suffering, and
Yeah, yeah, it is a suffering, and that's why we talk about corporate exodus for women. That's why they
yeah,
leave corporate life in droves.
yeah,
And it's a problem for corporations because they are the most, I mean, they're part of the most creative talent. They have a
hmm
natural, innate access to creativity. So it's a very big loss when the creative workforce leaves.
mm
But I do think that the numbers in which women leave are very, it's good that they're rising because it actually makes businesses wake up and say, you know,
mm
I mean, we
mm.
have a lot of focus on the diversity issue, but I would say that many still don't get the correlation between diversity and a better bottom line for all. Some people still don't get that this is not for women. We don't do this for women. We do this for the whole. This is not a women's issue. It's not a feminist issue as such. It's about common sense. It's about respecting the natural laws.
Yeah,
What do
and
you do?
no, and I agree. It's the same with the environment. With the corporate social responsibility. Do you do it to look good and it's a PR exercise, or do you protect the environment because it's the right thing to do? The companies that do conscious leadership because it's the right thing to do, they thrive. In America, we have Patagonia who sells clothes, they're thriving. I mean, they were led by Rose McCary, a woman, for 5 years. They quadruple revenue, quadruple profits. I mean, just amazing what she did. And she took over the founder who was very grounded in great values. And in Canada, we have a few companies like that, all led by women. That when you listen to the way they lead, it's very holistic. And there's actually a study which I would share with you from Korn Ferry, the headhunting firm, on the women CEOs in the US. They analyzed 2 years ago, there was only 35 CEOs out of 500. So they analyzed the five. And they said to become CEO, they had to do what men do. They had to have an operational role, be responsible for P&L. They mostly came from technical, science, engineering, all the same route. But then when they got the position, they led completely different. It was very realistic. They look long term. They asked for help. They build a community. Completely opposite. So they obviously got better results. And I like what you said. Do we promote women because that's what we have to do because it's going to look good, or do we actually believe holistically that it's going to do the right results? And I think conscious leaders understand that it actually creates better results, but it also honors. I like the word honoring. It honors the feminine. It honors the masculine. If 50% of our employees are women, why don't we have 50% of women leaders? And I mean, a very wise woman told me some of the reason is because some women are not willing to sacrifice because they're wiser. So they're not willing to sacrifice their marriage, their health, and their kids to become a VP or a president. And saying, okay, but then why don't we change the structure then so they could become without sacrificing all that, And
Yeah. That's what's necessary because I mean I am actually one of the ones who left
you did.
corporate life because when it dawned on me that the competition I was entering was called 1, 2, 3. Who's best at being a man? I realized I would always be number 2 in this competition
Yeah.
by default. So why participate in that? So I
Yeah.
exited. I was 26. Bye bye, and I became an entrepreneur.
Mm.
and I never regretted that because I love the freedom to create that comes with that. But I do
Yeah.
believe that, I do believe that it's a shame that the creative. My talent is being visionary. So I think that's actually nice for a company. Somebody who can look around the corner. It's always good for a company to have people like that. But most of the visionaries I know don't necessarily work in corporate lives unless they have founded their own company, where they
I agree.
allowed to be visionary.
I like what you said. The freedom. I when I became an entrepreneur, I found freedom for the first time, and now I've gone to another level. I call it sovereignty. So I believe in God. So I'm sovereign to God. But other than that, I do what I want with who I want when I want. So, and what I found is in a company, you're not. I mean, you're. Let's just be honest. We're all corporate slaves because they pay you the money. Then you have to do what the company. There's a room for creativity, but I found that a guy like me who's very, very creative outside the box, I was always contained. I was always a bit of a prisoner. So the question is, do we want to change corporations or we don't? Very often the people at the very top, they're the ones who have the most to lose if it changes too much, because then maybe they don't reach the results. Most CEOs are in position for 5 years. They want to get the bonus that comes with it. So the truly enlightened leaders, conscious leaders, they're willing to take risk and they're willing to look at the long term to do what's really, really right. And I mean, not all women are perfect leaders. Some women are more masculine than men that I've met, So but generally the women leaders that I meet are much more conscious. Kirsten, when I started 3 years ago to do conferences, it was my intuition, but it was validated. 80% of the people come are women because it resonates possibly with my energy, with a moralistic approach. But it's also because it's based on a leadership that's connected to the heart. So for many men, it's they don't understand. It's where's the spreadsheet, where's the PowerPoint, why intuition, what is it, But for the enlightened men, the ones that have connected with their holistic approach, then they understand. So I like what you said. It's the feminine. It's not women, but obviously there's more feminine in women in general. So.
Yeah, but I believe that the reward for the male leaders and the female leaders is that they gain much more than just the bottom line. I mean, it is also, I do believe that more and more people are also interested in happiness, joy, inner peace, good relationships. I mean, it is dawning on us that monetary success is not the only satisfying success. Actually, many people discover that, wow, I've achieved my results, but I'm still not happy, because that's the path of the ego, right? It's never, ever enough. So I believe that the more people reach that level of material satisfaction, the more people will realize that that was not the end goal, and they will be more curious towards, what else is possible. And this whole pressure with more and more angst and stress and pressure, and that the old ways simply don't work anymore, I believe that will animate more interest and curiosity. What other pathways are there? And then it's very inspiring to see some companies who are leading the way. And I would like to hear a little bit more about those companies in Canada, because I don't know many Canadian companies. Who do you think are role models for a new kind of leadership? Can you give some examples of who they are and what they do differently?
Yeah. I mean, in conscious leadership in the US, we have Patagonia who makes clothes, They make what other people make. They just make it in a way that's holistic, having the minimum impact on the environment. There's always an impact. As soon as we're born, someone told me, we have a negative impact because we consume. But they do it in a very holistic way. So not only quality, and Kirsten, how I know that the real deal is, I wanted to speak to the CEO, to be a speaker. And I didn't know the phone number. So I just called 1-800-Patagonia, where you and I would call to order a jacket. And the person answered, and I said, I want to speak to the CEO. She says, let me connect you, sir. And she found the number, and she connected me with her assistant at the head office. And I spoke to, I can't remember her name, and I said, I'm Stephane from Montreal. Oh, hello, Stephane. Oh, Rose is actually out at lunch. Can I take a message? And she arranged all that, and I was welcome, completely welcome. And I called Elon Musk's office at Tesla. I didn't get the same welcome. So I knew it's just different, you know. And I admire Elon Musk. But in Canada, we have a company called Prana, like Prana, in yoga, you know, the flow of life. And it's co-founded by a woman who's 40 now with her boyfriend that they met while she was traveling Asia at 18. You know, they met on a beach in India. They started a snack bar, and then they came back to Canada and making, you know, these LT bio organic nuts, you know, all sorts of in her kitchen, mom's kitchen. And now there are 100 employees and they sell in 25 countries and all. And she's the CEO who so humble, yet so powerful. So fully assuming your femininity, but then creative power, you know. And I find that when you're really powerful, you don't need to brag. You just have to be, you know. People will brag about you, but you don't need to be. And she taught all her employees to have positive intentions of love in the product because it will make people healthier. She took a sabbatical of 1 year. You know, with her husband, they confided, someone that managed the company. They went to all the countries where they buy the nuts. They went to Brazil to meet the farmer who makes the Brazil nuts. And they went to meet all these people to make sure they were well cared for. Because, you know, they're often in challenging countries. And they were cited in Forbes magazine for consuming 100 times less water than all their competitors. So when you meet her, you see that she's the real deal, you know, and every part of her company, conscious leadership is integrated. So obviously the business is booming and she doesn't have to force it because it just reflects. And I believe that when you lead consciously, there is an energy. There is people love you when they buy, people love you that when they work for you, the community celebrates you. So it has so what we want most as leaders, which is financial results, we attain by doing something else. And it's a result. And you talked about joy and happiness at work. You know, Gallup has declared that we have a worldwide crisis of mental health challenges in companies. 20% of people worldwide are almost burnt out, and another 20% are ready to be burnt out. So 40%. And then we also have 67% of employees who are disengaged around the world. I mean, that's a huge waste amount of money. So if we can connect, you know, if you work with me and we connect and you're inspired and you show up and you want to give your all, then you're going to be more creative, more productive, and everyone's going to benefit. It sounds so common sense, but it's not. It's not what's applied. Most people manage from the head and results and fear. I believe that we can transform the world if we lead with love completely, because then we free the whole potential of people. Because no one really operates really creatively with a gun to their head, you know, when they're really scared. And this old way of managing, which is all fear-based, it's archaic. I think it's going to die. And I think, and I love entrepreneurship because entrepreneurs, they can do what they want. As long as they satisfy the banker, you know, and they pay their bills. You know, as an entrepreneur, you and I, we can get up one day and do what we want. You know, and if it's aligned with our values, we can go much faster. So there's quite a few. There are other people that are. There's a big bank here where I live, 50,000 employees, and the CEO declared 2 years ago that his vision is to be number one in people's hearts. So that's very aspirational coming from a banker, and it starts with his own people because, you know, in the banking industry, it's a lot of customer service. So his own people, and then can touch the clients, you know, because they have 6 million clients. So I thought that was quite courageous for a man CEO to declare that. And when you deal with them, you feel it. You feel it. They're the only bank in Canada that's still giving breaks for COVID. You know, entrepreneurs or people that cannot pay their mortgage, they help them. You know, so they're really looking at leadership in a holistic point of view. So. But around the world, there's quite a few examples of companies that are trying. The question always is it true or is it public relations? You know, we've come to a point where conscious leadership is becoming more popular. So are people doing it because they feel it's the right thing to do, or doing it because it looks good? You know, like, and I think we can feel that in the energy. You know, and also in the actions that they actually take, you know, because As a conscious leader, you're always tested. I mean, there's quarter ends every 3 months. You have to declare your results, and I'm quite vocal. You see me in my posts. The worst companies for environmental protection in Canada are Nestle, McDonald's, Coca-Cola. And if we as citizens keep buying from them, that means we encourage their unconsciousness. So I challenge. I go a lot to universities to present to students conscious leadership. And I tell them, when I see someone show up with a plastic water bottle, I said, why are you doing that? You're encouraging pollution. So as a young person, if you believe in environment, you should live it, every day. So I think as citizens, we don't need to wait for the elections to vote for the government. We vote every day with our money. And if we don't buy from Starbucks because don't protect the environment, then they're going to go bankrupt. They're going to have to make changes. So like 2 years ago, I stopped going to Starbucks because I discovered that they don't honor their environmental policy. They say they care about the environment as much as me, but it's a lie because everything in the kitchen of the store goes in the garbage. There's no recycling. So I said, I can't support you.
Yeah, and I think that this is that is one example of a squeeze that will force change, and I think that there will be plenty of squeezes now.
Yeah.
In every single way, good employees leaving the company. I mean, I talk to so many pioneers who are about to leave their company, and I really try to talk them into staying and making the changes in the company, but they're exhausted. They're burned out from trying to be change agents on top of their real job.
Yeah.
So I think that this exodus of talent, and also at a time where we're facing more and more challenges and more demands from consumers, and more transparency in the media. You can't get away with the same things that you used to do when there was no social media watching you all the time. So I believe that cocktail has to foster change. The question is, if it can happen fast enough. Because we are running out of time. I mean, it's a quarter to midnight, and the clock is ticking. So that's the big question. But I also believe consciousness is the solution to that, because I like this quote from Albert Einstein: that we cannot change the problems, we cannot solve the problems at the same level of consciousness as what we were created. So I really believe that shift in consciousness is mandatory for this change to happen. And I would say it is a process, right? It's like it has taken me time to
It is a process, Kirsten, but it is accelerating. They actually measure the vibration of the earth, and it's called the Schumann resonance, and the vibration of the earth has significantly increased, and humanity is going to follow. What I believe is going to happen is that there's going to be more and more crises. There's more and more environmental crises. I was talking to a friend in California. They had huge fires because it was like thunderstorms with no water, so everything was catching on fire. I mean, that's not normal. It's never happened before, and it's burning everything. So now people are noticing the environmental crisis. Before, it was just on TV. With COVID, we find out that, it's touching me, my work. I've lost revenue. Okay, now I'm paying attention. I think what has happened over the last few years is that we're going to be in permanent crises. The COVID is predicted to result in a huge financial crisis, in 12 months probably. And then a lot of people are going to be affected, even the rich people. And then it's going to be more and more. So I think it's forcing us to face what we were trying to ignore. You live in a good country like mine, we have good work, good wine on Friday night, go shopping on Saturday, pretending like there's no problem. We all know there's a lot of challenges in society, and we choose to ignore it. Like, one thing that really hurts my heart every day is we measure the COVID deaths, but every year there's 9.1 million people dying of hunger. We don't talk about that. And your country is as rich as mine. There's a lot of wealthy people. If we collectively, humanity, wanted to save these people, it would be quite easy, because it'd be a few dollars for you and a few dollars for me, but nothing ever gets done. And it really gets me upset when I see a CEO like Amazon. He's now worth 200 billion. He will be in our lifetime, you and I, the first trillionaire. But then he pays his employee minimum wage. They can't afford to buy a house. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, what kind of void psychologically is he trying to fill, this man? When are you going to wake up and start helping other people? You know, and there's a lot of that, and so then I think we need to point the finger at ourselves. You know, what do I do every day? And I do the best I can, you know, with my time and coaching young people and all sorts of things. So I think consciousness is rising, and I think the people like us and many others who are embracing the change, I think we'll have an easier time. I think for some other people, it's going to be quite dramatic what they're going to have to face in their lives if they've never cracked open, you know, the heart. Because I like what you said before. I reflected recently. I coach people when there's already a crack. I'm not the guy to make the crack because, you know, the universe has it. But when there's a crack, then I allow light to come in and lots of love and then huge expansion. But I know from my own lifetime that it's so difficult to open. And sometimes we have to go through severe. You had the awakening at 26. I'm going to leave the corporate world. I left at 45. Took me a long time. But I think it's going to happen for most people. And they're going to face, you know, what they need to face to awaken. So I put my trust and faith in humanity and the rise of consciousness. If I didn't believe we could save the world and change it, I wouldn't be doing what I do. But I believe that through the rise of consciousness and through the rise of the feminine, you know, Kirsten, it's very evident for me that we have nothing to do for the rise of the feminine. It's rising by itself. We just have to stop stopping it. It's rising by itself, you know, and it's what we're trying to heal is centuries of the domination of the masculine. We just have to stop doing that. If we allow the feminine to rise, it's just going to rise. It's just going to bloom like it's supposed to bloom. Like a plant blooms when it's a fertile soil. And I think what I'm finding now is, I know it's threatening, the patriarchy, when we have Donald Trump criticizing Greta Thunberg, who's 16, you know, and I know that the feminine is threatening organizations and stuff when they start to want to dominate it more, you know. So that's it.
Yeah, I think you're right that the feminine is rising. It's a force that cannot be stopped. I think in English you would say the cat is out of the box or something. The cat is out of something.
Yeah. It's a very strong force.
Yeah, it's very strong but I do believe we can accelerate it. That's why I've been working with women for so long.
Yeah.
I started a goddess school in 2003 because I do believe that if women are conscious about their feminine power, this change can happen much faster and with much more gentle, loving care for the masculine in all of us, because we don't want to repeat the war of the sexes from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
That's not that's not appropriate at this time.
No.
Because I think we need to create the collaborative society. So this is absolutely about embracing and including the men and helping the masculine. The masculine that wants to wake up. I mean, it's definitely not all, but those who are motivated, you know, hallelujah, they're so important for evolution.
Yeah, but I agree, Kirsten, that the feminine needs the masculine to heal, and the masculine needs the feminine. And sometimes, when I post on Facebook, I see where people are in their evolution. I've seen many women recently. I posted something about the man is also wounded. And you know, we need the feminine to help us heal, to basically embrace our vulnerability, allow us to be vulnerable without judgment. And I've found through some conscious relationship with very powerful women that when I'm embraced in my masculine and my vulnerability, I'm much more powerful, you know, because I'm whole. And I've seen some women say, that's not our job. We have enough to fix ourselves. They can fix themselves. Okay, so obviously that women didn't get it, that it's both of us, you know. I also see in some feminine women in business movement, it's almost like we're going to take over from the men. That's not going to work. As soon as you threaten the men, they're going to resist. It's about embracing each other. You know, it's a very holistic approach. And I think this approach that I think we're both promoting is a very evolved approach. It's embracing the qualities of both. You know, because I'm wise enough to know that even if a very feminine woman has masculine quality, to be an entrepreneur, you have no choice. And my hope is that one day we don't talk about feminine, masculine quality. We just talk about qualities, you know, characteristics, and we embrace both. And So yeah, I agree. And what I was trying to say is that the feminine is naturally rising. It's not, and we can support it, and then we accelerate it. So that's what I'm dedicating my time to and my life to.
Yeah, and that's why we're so aligned, because that's the same thing I do.
Yeah.
That I find it's a very worthwhile cause, and I find that there are many more men and women who are interested in this cause now. But I do believe that fear also plays a role in this process, because many women, I mean, even in Scandinavia, which is considered one of the most equity-oriented societies in the world, or we have a few countries that are very advanced in the area of equity, but still we don't know much about the feminine, and we're not really conscious about what is our feminine strengths and power, and what is the primordial feminine power. We're not really aware of that. We think the feminine is just about aesthetics and being kind and being a little bit passive and chaotic. We have very very limited, very narrow definition of the feminine, and the masculine actually also is viewed in a stereotypical way. It's like, oh yeah, okay, these are the rational, linear thinking people, the ones who will not be able to multitask. And, we have a lot of stereotypes about what the masculine and feminine is, and I think it's really time to broaden up and see that this is such a wide range of qualities, and there's so much depth to both the masculine and feminine, and we have so much choice in which parts of us we develop and unfold and wake up and nourish and bring to the table and bring to the dance between the masculine and the feminine. We have a lot of choice. We have free choice, actually, if we're aware of possibilities. So I believe that this rise of consciousness is also about becoming conscious of the wide range of the masculine and the feminine, that we need to look at it in a completely new way and see everybody has access to it all the time, 24/7.
I agree.
It's free.
I think we need to break all stereotypes, because not all men are women. I could say you're a Scandinavian woman, so you should be like that. Who knows how you are? Who knows what life challenges you overcome? And so I think we put too much stereotypes. And I think, I was raised as a boy, so I can only know, but there's a lot of suffering. You're not supposed to cry. You're supposed to be like this. And I take it really seriously that 80% of the suicides are men, because they're not allowed to show vulnerability. And what I'm trying to tell women, you have a role to play in making it okay for a man to cry. It doesn't make it a weak man. It just makes a whole man. And by holding space for a man to cry as a woman, you're actually showing your power. And you're embracing the man in his full masculinity, and then he becomes a more powerful man. I thank a few women, friends who have created me, helped to create me as a very powerful man, because they've held space for me. But in return, I hold space for them, to be vulnerable to. And I find in the best relationships is when a woman who's really powerful feels that she doesn't need to use her power because she's embraced, that's true power. A man who's, women at the extreme, men dominate, women manipulate. At the low end, and unevolved. When as a woman, you don't need to manipulate anything because you're always embraced. And as a man, you don't need to dominate because you're always, then it's a true relationship. Then we start to support the rise of each other. And I'm finding in circles where I'm part of a few men's circle of evolved men. We cry, we show our vulnerability. And then the women I hang around with, they honor me as a man with my vulnerability, and it's just beautiful. And it's like a microcosm of what's possible in society. And I think the more evolved, even Google said the biggest characteristics of a true leader is to create a safe space psychologically to be who we truly are. So if we as leaders can create space for people to show up as they really, really are, knowing that next week they might be different because they're evolving, they're healing, I think we're really contributing to creating this different society. And I find that a lot of people who lead countries and companies, they go into the stereotype. I'm a man, I'm a CEO, I need to perform, I need to deliver results, I need to sacrifice. And then we keep destroying the environment, and we destroy people's quality of life too. And I think the most conscious leaders, I think, have embraced their feminine side. And if they're women, they've embraced their masculine side because they had no choice. They're in business. I think they create better results. They create employee satisfaction. They create fulfillment. They promote creativity just because people feel safe. So what leaders really, really want in the end, which is results, you can actually do it while making good, making people feel good, making clients feel good, and creating a positive society.
Absolutely, yeah, that is absolutely the goal. But I do find that a lot of people are super duper afraid of this level of intimacy.
Yeah.
Not least at home, but also obviously at work and in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are hyper afraid of love. So they will do anything to push it away and keep their defenses up and push push away their own vulnerability and not risk losing face or not risk being vulnerable. I mean, we spend a lot of energy on keeping up our defenses as a culture, and I believe that this is what needs to. This is what needs to change, and I believe that that's why maybe a little bit of more suffering is not so bad, because suffering makes us more motivated to find other ways.
Recently I've discovered that my transformation now is happening through joy. In the past, it was always through suffering, and I and a lot of people kept asking me in my transformation work, can we transform through pleasure and joy? And I was always saying no, because I didn't have that experience. It was always through pain and suffering. And I think we need to suffer through pain and suffering until the shell is cracked.
Yeah.
When the shell is cracked, we don't need to suffer anymore, because now we can. So I've never had so much healing over the last 5 months through some relationship because of joy. Because of love and joy and connection, I'm healing so much more, because now there's a fertile ground for healing. So I think you talked about happiness at work. I think obviously all of us create more when we feel good. All of us are more productive. We're better with clients when we feel good about ourselves. So as leaders, if we create an environment where it's infused with love and there's the least amount of fear possible, then I think we can achieve greatness, true greatness. But unfortunately, in business schools, we learn to manage by fear, reports, KPIs, all this stuff, It's still, Kirsten, I go to universities, present conscious leadership, and I'm like the entertainer. I come, one night out of the whole semester. They still teach the traditional leadership, and I'm so disappointed. I'm saying, wow. And the young people, they listen to me, they're enthused. They say, wow, there is such a leadership that is different. So we have a lot of work to do. And I'm talking about my country. I used to work for Volvo, so I went to Sweden quite a bit, and I found in Sweden a more evolved culture than my country. Much more evolved, and nothing's perfect, because what I found with the Swedes is that because of their need for conformity, it's tougher to transform. To be a rebel. I was a rebel, from America. And they told me to tone it down, to be more like the others. And I'm saying, okay, but how much change do you want? But then I found the same here in America. People want change, but do they really want change? So yeah, it's quite exciting. I think we live in an age where I love action movies. And I think what we're seeing in society now is a true action movie. I'm looking at I think we're going to live over the next 10 years, huge breakthroughs in consciousness. I can see it. I can feel it. And I'm quite excited by that.
It is very exciting. It's also highly necessary.
Yeah.
And I can report that even in Scandinavia, it's considered very progressive countries, but we have a lot of work to do. Because we have also gone unconscious. We've had a very, our comfortability has made us fall a little bit asleep. I think that what made the Scandinavian countries and great countries in the first place was that quite good yin-yang balance. But we were not conscious about what created that. It was sort of, it happened and we enjoyed it, but we weren't conscious about how can we cultivate it? And now we need a new level of consciousness. What is actually that creates a good yin-yang balance? And we need to make room for that. And I think many leaders, before they see the need for it, they won't change. So many leaders need to suffer a little bit. It needs to, the bottom line has to suffer a little bit, or they can't sell anymore, or something needs to happen. So they say, okay, we have to do something a bit differently. And that's why COVID can be a gift, in the sense that you just can't continue business as usual. We have to be a little bit creative or open for massive disruption, and see what are you going to do there. And I believe that when we have a true crisis, we look around for true leaders. I can see that some of my I do leadership trainings for the pioneers, and I can see that they become noticed in their companies, especially in times of crisis, because they stick out. Because they have this different energy. They're more balanced. They're more optimistic. They're more creative. They don't get stressed or panicky. So those kinds of leaders, they are more visible in times of crisis, because you look around for who's not panicking, who's not full of angst, who's not running around like a hen without its head. Then you will see those new leaders more clearly. I believe that's what we're going to have. I just wanted to check if we have any questions, because I said to people, you are actually allowed to ask questions. So if anybody has any questions, I would just give them room to ask those. Let's see here if we have this is the first time I am broadcasting on several platforms at the same time. So I'm not really used to how that works. But I can see that we have viewers, but they just don't seem to ask any questions. So we can just go ahead and talk for ourselves. So Stephane, what do you do? So you offer conferences on conscious leadership and online conferences. I can see that you have one big one coming up in the rise of feminine, the rise of the divine feminine. So how do you work with, how do you promote conscious leadership besides your beautiful social media posts, your conference, your events?
So what I have a few pillars. So I organize a few, I call them summits, like a mountain, summits of conscious leadership in French and English. It used to be conscious leadership, and then last year in March, I was inspired at 3 a.m. to create one for women in French, and I always say yes to life when I get an inspiration. And 2 weeks later, we launched it, and 2 months later, we had 150 women show up, and they said, it's the first conference about feminine leadership in business that we've ever seen that was like that, so much into the heart. And so I do 8 conferences a year, 8 summits. And now it's online. Before it used to be physical, in person. So I'm a person who likes to meet people and feel the energy. So I'm quite deprived from that by being online. But what it does, it allows to reach a broader audience. So there's one on October 8th, as you mentioned, and it's a global one. So I have speakers from all over the world and participants from all over the world. I also do leadership training, Conscious Leadership Academy, I call it. So it's a leadership training program. And I do one-on-one coaching. And I say women because all my clients are women. And when I advertise an event, even a training, it's mostly women that show up. So it seems to be the energy that I have, the masculine serving the rise of the feminine, and because I honor the feminine, then I'm very powerful, and women feel safe, and then I bring my masculine to destroy all the barriers. So I think it's a great combination, and all my clients are always women that want to play a big role. They're all change agents, they're all catalysts for change. A lot of them have changed careers. They've done what you and I have done. I call myself a corporate refugee. I left the corporate world, but I work with corporate people. But it's like the wise man coming down the mountain, to help you transform. And I don't call myself a wise man, but I know that with life, wisdom finds its way to us. So that's what I do, and I'm also writing a book. It's called. It's going to be called The Conscious Leadership Revolution, and I want to tell you a bit how they came about. I was at the Museum of Fine Arts here in my city 2 years ago, and there was an exposition called Revolution on the 1960s, the years of the hippie and the Woodstock Festival. And there was a huge screen, video screen, showing a concert at Woodstock. And I love that kind of music, And I was listening, and it dawned on me, this was the era of love, flower power. It was the Vietnam War. All these people that were in their teens, young adults, were all promoting love. But these people are all running countries and companies now. And I thought to myself, where's the love gone? Where's the love gone? These were all. So I said, we need a revolution. There's no time for evolution. We need a revolution of leadership, but a revolution based on love. We need to reintroduce love in leadership, because I think a leader at the foundation is someone who loves himself or herself enough to love others. Because I've discovered in my personal relationship, if you don't love yourself, you're a taker of love. You take love from other people. If you love yourself, you give generously. And my great revelation is the more you give, the more you get. You don't have to ask for it. You get so much when you give, So it's counterintuitive for most people. But I think when you love as a leader, you also love your people. You take it seriously that they confide their career, their time, to come to you, and you want to make them grow. And you love your clients. You truly love your clients. So I think if you are a loving leader, then you're naturally a conscious leader. And at the beginning, Kirsten, I was advised by some marketing friends, don't talk about love in business because it's not going to be popular. I said, I don't really care about that, And now I'm asked to do many conferences a year because of who I am, of what I talk about, which is all about love and leadership. And I know because of my career that love and leadership creates amazing results because people love you, so they will do more for you. You don't even have to ask them. They will do it because they actually love you. So it's what I found is leadership is a love affair between you and your people and the people you serve, the clients. That's what it is really. So yeah, I'm a bit of a rebel because for most bankers and corporate executives, they will listen to me and they would say, Stephane's crazy. And what I found is we're only called crazy because we're maybe ahead by a few years, And in the old days, a few hundred years ago, they would bring people like you and I to the guillotine, because our ideas would be too advanced. So you and I are probably burnt at the stakes many times in previous lifetimes. But I think in our modern age, we reach the right people, and other people are curious, And my journey is quite remarkable in terms of being supported. I started with no followers. And now I have 50,000 people, through all platforms, and I've been to 6 countries, and I talk about conscious leadership. In the beginning, people were asking me, what is it? I had to define it for them. And now where I live in my old province of 8 million people know I'm the guy who talks about that. And suddenly they call, they say, oh yeah, we want to talk to you now because we understand what you've been talking about all this time. So, they say that at some point, it's the time for a great idea, Every great idea finds the time where it blooms. And I think it's the time now for conscious leadership and feminine leadership. It's the time, it's the age. And I'm quite enthused because I have kids. My daughter's 17. I want her to have the same chance as my son, who's 19, And I think in her lifetime, she will see that. I think she will see over the next 40 years a much accelerated rise of the feminine and a much accelerated rise of conscious leadership.
I certainly hope so. I have sons, and I also really want them to experience a world where they can be authentic and employ both their masculine and their feminine, and they don't have to adapt to a particular culture. I would like to ask you to end here. What if you could give 3 advice for a woman who wants to take conscious leadership and a man who wants to take conscious leadership, and they have to be different.
I would say that for a woman, it would be to embrace her true essence, what's already there. So women are naturally more feminine, and they've been asked to dilute it. So I would say to fully embrace it, and that's going to give them access to their full power. So then it would be to embrace their power and assume the consequences that come with it. Sometimes it's breakage of relationships. Sometimes, and the third one is to connect with other women that vibrate at the same level. I've seen that sometimes women could do better to support each other. You know, in America, they call it the boys club. The men naturally support each other, but I've seen some women not to do that. Is to embrace the whole community, because I think as a community to rise, you know, it's good for a man to stand for the rise of the feminine, but I think women could do better to support each other. So I would say that. For a man, it would be open your heart. Open your heart. First step. It starts from there. It would be to honor your vulnerability. You know, you don't have to be a superhero anymore. Even Superman goes home and opens his heart. You know, at some point, you'll find out that the more you embrace your vulnerability in small circles, the more powerful you are because you're healing. And the third would be to make a strong commitment to support the rise of the feminine, because it's the right thing to do. It makes more money. It creates a better world. And to have faith. You know, at the beginning, you need to have faith that this is, but eventually it transfers into trust, because you now see the results of your support. So that's what I would say.
Beautiful piece of advice, dear Stephane. I really appreciate. I so appreciate having met you, and I appreciate the work you do in the world. And I'm very, very happy to have a male colleague who does the same kind of work, because I believe that we need many voices, many different voices, and it's also beautiful that we come from different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about conscious leadership. In the beginning, I talked about feminine leadership, but then I realized that men are not so keen on that. So now I talk about illuminary leadership. That you light up, that you really become a beacon of light, that other people can notice and follow, and that you work for the light.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's really been such an honor to meet you, and I am certain it's not going to be the last time.
Beautiful. Thank you. It's been an honor for me.
Yeah, I hope that I will see you at a conference, or meet you online again, or interview you again, or at some point, you know, stay in touch. And I will keep sharing your beautiful posts and all the wisdom that you pour into the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's go back to working for a more conscious world, at home, at work, and in society, and vote for the light, and really hold the vision that this time we're going to make it happen as humanity.
Beautiful.
We're going to make the change that there's a calling for.
I'm all in. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.